In Hebrew, the term teshuvah means to remember. And for the Jewish people, that was at the centerpiece of almost everything that they did. To sit and pause and to think about the things that God has done is to put them at the center of the thing that God is doing and possibly is going to do all over again. So all their feasts and festivals and the calendar that they followed, it was all about remembering instead of pointing ahead. There was this value of pausing, sitting, telling stories, looking at what God is doing, and teaching their children, this is the character of God. And there was joy in that, especially because for a bunch of Jewish history, it was filled with pain. And so during the church calendars, their festivals, and all the things that they would follow, they would point back to times of hope and peace and joy and love, and the times that God would show up and the earth would shake and people would fall and there'd be freedom, and they would tell the stories of God. To sit and remember, to pause and remember, and to tell stories, and to think about how God showed up in the past was this beautiful value for the Jewish family. Sometimes I'll be out hiking and I will be in the back country, and as I'm exploring or doing the things I do, I will come upon an old graveyard. It's a thing. There have been cultures and cities and people who settled here, and I will come upon these old gravestones, and at that moment, it's kind of like the hike is over, because I am going to stay there for hours in this posture of curiosity. Who are these people? And by simply asking, who are these people, I go to these places of joy. I think about the person who is sitting in this space had parents, and their parents had been excited about their pregnancy, and like they're excited about the birth. And how did this person celebrate their birthday? How did this person fall in love for the first time? Did they go to prom? Did they even have prom? I mean, like, how did he propose to his wife, and the joy he felt and the obligation to provide? Or did he feel and gravestone after gravestone after gravestone, I'm like having all of these thoughts about what would it be like to remember this person and their story and their journey. And typically to come to a place that there are graves, it's a place of sorrow. It's a painful place. It could be. That could be our perspective. But as you begin to dream and recall and remember people and the story, there seems to be this sense of joy that wells up in this idea of, I wonder how God showed up for this person. I wonder how this person prayed and encountered God's grace. I wonder, and the wonderment brings us to this place of joy. My friends and I have this podcast called Tales from the Secret Cabin, and it began from this idea of like how cool it would be to follow the church calendar and to talk about the behind the scenes things that happen in church culture and seeing what God is doing. And our theme has been Advent. And there's been a podcast on hope and peace, and there's been the podcast on the topic of love. And our podcast on joy, it was different for me. I was expecting to talk about, how the birth of Jesus and the pregnancy of the virgin birth and all of that, and how she was filled as far as the hope of God and the joy of God and the peace of God, and that idea brought her joy. But because a podcast is a conversation, and because there's different ideas and concepts that are brought out by different people, someone brought up this idea of joy and the most joyful person that they have ever experienced. And as soon as they brought this person up, the tone in the room dropped. It was like they had just dropped this sorrow bomb, but their intent had been to bring joy and talk about joy. And they brought up the story of their best friend who had died of cystic fibrosis and how he embodied the essence of joy. And at first, as soon as this man was brought up, like there was like this guttural crying, like, oh my gosh, this has been a person who, like sorrow. And then they began telling stories about times they spent together, birthdays that they celebrated, adventures that they had, and these inside jokes began to come out, and there was laughter and joy and hope and inspiration, and it brought us to this potential place that it felt like Christmas was just around the corner. These places of remembering, these places that say, don't forget, these places that God says, I'm preparing a table for you so that you can see the things I have done, so you can see what I am doing, so you can understand what I'm about to do. Christmas is on the horizon. The term teshuvah, it means remember, but it also means repent. In fact, it's very commonly used by the prophets. That they're always saying teshuvah, teshuvah, teshuvah. And it would be repent, repent, repent. It also is remember, remember, remember. As if at the beginning of the gospel, our first step is to do both. It's to remember what God has done. There is this idea that if the Jewish people remembered what God did for them, that they would be brought back to this place of the beginning of hope, the beginning of peace, the beginning of joy, the beginning of love. So whenever we come back to the table, whenever we open our doors, whenever we go through our photo albums of Christmas past, Christmas present, and our hearts for Christmas future, we are saying teshuvah, 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 remembering, repenting, bringing our hearts of hope, love, peace, and joy, and saying Christmas is just around the corner, and I believe in the promises of God. As you light the fourth and final Advent candle, this is the candle of joy. May you experience joy from the things that God has done in the past, the things that God is doing now in the present, and the thing that God is going to do tomorrow. May you experience joy in the places that God has shown up, and may you tell the story with vigor and passion and hope. As you light the fourth and final candle, the candle of joy, may your heart for Christmas swell within inside of you, so that there is nothing more that you desire than for Jesus to show up bigger in your life. May you have a very Merry Christmas.